You're listening to Worshipology with Curtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about living and leading worship. Today's episode is brought to you by PraiseCharts. Worship leaders and pastors, are you looking for the best new worship songs to introduce to your church? From Phil Wickham to Elevation, Passion, and Maverick City, PraiseCharts has the latest ready to go. Whether you need chord charts, lead sheets, or full orchestrations, everything is formatted for your team and available for instant download. Stay current, save time, and lead with confidence. Check out PraiseCharts.com today and get your hands on the freshest songs for Sunday.
Well, hey, thanks so much for listening to the Worshipology podcast. This is a conversation all about living and leading worship. And today, I've got a guy who is not only one of the coolest dudes on the planet, but has one of the coolest accents. Adrian Thompson, say what's up, man.
Hey, good to be with you, Curtis. Glad to be on here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, man, I'm excited about this conversation. Now, Adrian, you and I, we met like back in I was at National Community Church. You were working with Integrity Music, A&R.
Yeah.
And what was that? Was that 2014?
2013, 2014, around that time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we came to the US in August of 2013. So I think it might have been fall of 2013 was the first time we met. Yeah.
Wow. And we did that project, A Worship Collective album together. And then we ended up working together on a couple NCC projects. You Alone was our EP.
That's right.
And
That's
you're
right.
amazing, man. We just had such a good time connecting back then. And then, of course, through the years, just kind of seeing how your career has evolved and helped different artists and in different spheres. And dude, just for our listeners, Adrian, why don't you just kind of tell everybody how'd you get involved in this whole thing with worship and ministry and, of course, labels and publishing and all that? And where are you today, man?
Okay. Well, I'm older, so therefore it takes a longer story, and I'm Irish, so we're good at telling stories. So I'll try and keep it as brief as I can.
Hey.
But basically, I was brought up in Northern Ireland, hence the accent. It's not a Southern accent; it's from Northern Ireland, and basically was brought up a Christian family. My mom played piano and organ in the church, and we were there 3-4 times on a Sunday. And at a young age, kind of became a Christian. But at 13, I was at a youth group one night, and it was in late November. And I remember that was when the light came on, and suddenly went, this Christianity thing isn't the free ticket to heaven. This is a lifestyle and a relationship. Wow. And that flipped the switch for me. And I remember going home that night. We lived in council housing, like government housing. We were definitely working class in every way. And my parents said, what do you want for Christmas? And I said, I'd love a guitar. And their faces kind of went white, and they went, well, we don't know if we can afford a guitar or not, so don't be disappointed. And I went, okay. So I prayed every night, said, Lord, if you give me a guitar, I'll only use it for you. And on Christmas Day, guitar, which was amazing. And so basically I started off playing in youth group, doing choruses as it was back then, like just little choruses, which is great. And then started playing in a little band with some friends from church, just around coffee bars, youth groups, that kind of thing. And then evolving into another band, which we started doing like more of our own events, and just not knowing what we were doing. There was no scene in Northern Ireland. You just did your thing. Wow. And we were seeing kids become Christians, and then them wanting to pursue a relationship with God, that they're finding it hard to adjust into a more traditional church setting. So we did some teaching stuff. We saw Holy Spirit really move. Moved to England, lived in the floor of a church hall for 3 months in central London.
Wow.
And all that, like, we went through lots of stuff, which is like way too much to go into in this podcast. But eventually, a friend, actually my brother-in-law, contacted me and said, hey, I'm doing some work at this recording studio in the South Coast that we had recorded in, South Coast of England. And he said, they're looking at starting a label. I think you should talk to them. So I did just message them, and they asked me to come down and see if I would be a good fit for them to do like sales and marketing, which I didn't really know. So I went, and they offered me the role. It was really just trying to help indie bands that were coming down and recording and needed some distribution. It was the days of physical distribution. So I went down, and basically over time, within the first year, they made me label manager, which was great. But basically, because of all the touring I'd done, because of the relationships we built across Europe, I was able to set up some publishing network, physical distribution throughout Europe and then beyond. Wow. That just rolled through. It helped.
And what's the time frame of all this, Adrian?
This would have been in 1994. Okay. We started that. One of the first songs I signed was Days of Elijah. That helped.
There you go.
So it was basically, I was there for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, sorry, this is long, but I'll try and...
This is so cool, though. I love it.
At the end of 10 years, it was our most profitable year. And I remember coming out on Christmas Eve, my wife picked me up and said, "You glad you're finished for the year?" And I went, "No." And she said, "Why?" And I said, as I was walking down the steps, I just felt God say, "That's it, you're finished here." And I was like, wow. I don't know what's next. So for 2-3 months, I was just praying, seeking God, going, do I retrain? Do I do something different? What do I do? And then out of the blue, I got a call from a person who was president of Kingsway Music and Survivor Records in the UK. Yeah. And they called me about something completely different. And then at the end of the call said, I just feel it's time you and I work together. And I was like, oh, didn't see that coming. And so we spent some time talking and praying, and we just felt, yeah, this is the right move. So went across, did A&R for Survivor Records and Kingsway Music. They were owned by a company in America called David C. Cook. And then eventually David C. Cook purchased Integrity Music, then merged both companies. But a little fun thing, back when I was with the independent label, I came across to what was GMA Week, Dove Week, in Nashville, just to do our annual sales call, everything else. And I was having a meeting with Integrity because they did a sub-publishing deal with Days of Elijah and some of our other catalog. And I remember during that meeting, I had this voice in my ear just kind of went, "And one day you'll work for Integrity." And I thought, jet lag. I forgot about it, put it out of my mind until David C. Cook purchased Integrity and merged both companies together. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm working for Integrity Music. How did that happen? Yeah. And then in 2013, we were asked to come across to America and relocate and head up A&R for Integrity, which I did. And I was there until 2021. Again, I kind of felt my season.
Let me pause you for a second. So when you say A&R, just so that like the average listener who may not understand what that is, what that means, what exactly is that in the world of music, Adrian?
Okay. Well, we joke about it saying it's airports and restaurants because that's where we spend our time. But in reality, it actually, if you go back to a lot of the labels from like the 50s and 60s, they had these people who were great singers but couldn't write, or great writers that couldn't sing. So you had artists, and then you had repertoire, and repertoire was the songs. And what the job of an A&R department was trying to put the songs with the singer, or the singer with the songs. Wow. And so, I mean, it's evolved over time. There's different parts of that now, but essentially when you come back to the roots, it's really putting together the artists with the right songs and the songs with the right artists. That's really what it is.
Very cool. So it's 2013, you moved to the US, you're doing A&R with Integrity. Yep.
We were based in Colorado Springs till 2017, relocated with the team to Nashville area. Yeah. And but about 2019, I started to feel that my time was coming to an end at Integrity. And in 2021, through a really weird set of circumstances, I was asked would I come and work with Bethel Music, which wasn't on my radar at the time, but there were just too many things about it, that between prophetic words that had been spoken to me and just the way it came together, it was an undoubted God moment. So I've been doing A&R with Bethel Music since October of 2021.
That's so cool, man. Now, it's interesting because, you know, the world of book publishing and the world of music publishing isn't super different. I mean, a lot of guys kind of are in different camps, and you've been doing this for like 40 years and there's not a ton of names in the industry. Well, I mean, you know, I was on your website earlier today, but there's not a ton of people in the industry that, like, when they walk, they leave a wake of kindness and people talk good about them behind their back. And I just feel like, every time your name's brought up, it's brought up with a smile, and it's brought up with, like, man, Adrian, and I just know personally from working with you, you're a guy that really just not just cares about the industry, but cares about the artist, cares about the songs. That's why you're doing what you're doing. And talk about that for a little bit. Like, what does it look like to be faithful in an industry where maybe people looking from outside in wouldn't always say, yeah, faithfulness is the first word that pops up.
Man, that's very kind. I think for me, where all really comes down to is I always saw this as a calling and not as a career. Okay. And I think when you look on it that way, it's like my kids asked me a few years ago, it's like, Dad, how did you get to do this? And it's kind of like, honestly, there is no career path. It was kind of like you say yes to God and you're faithful when you walk in that room, and then he opens another door and you say yes, and then you be faithful in that room. And I think it's like, honestly, I do look at it. I know people say this in different ways, but it's true. I kind of look at it and go, how did somebody from a little town in the north of Ireland of 28,000 people, which is a bit of a no-hope town, how did I end up being able to work alongside some of the most prolific songwriters for our church who are writing songs for generations to come, will offer praise to God? And how do I get to be in those rooms? And it's kind of like, I don't know. And the only way I can put it down is going, Lord, I'm grateful and I will serve the best I can. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't, but people are the most important thing. And it's kind of like, we've got to treat people well. It's kind of like, somebody once said, treat people well on the way up and they'll be good to you on the way down. Well, hopefully, I don't know where I am in that scale, but I think you have to treat people with kindness and respect, because that's how we have been treated by God. There's no other way to do it. So whether it's the production guy plugging in XLRs into the stage box who might smell of BO and sweat because he's been crawling around the ground, or whether it's the pastor, it's kind of like we need to treat them equally as well. So I think kindness, I'm humbled by that in a nicest way, but I honestly feel we have to be kind to people and we have to be honest. I think that's the other thing, is that not being scared to have the honest conversation, but giving people dignity in the conversation, because everybody wants to say yes. Everybody wants to say, this is what I want. I love making the call to somebody going, your song's been cut on this album, or this is streaming so well, or this is doing great at radio. That's the easy call. And that's a wonderful call to do. The difficult call is sitting going, these songs aren't working. Wow. These are not connecting. But we can do things to change this, and it's kind of, it's always looking for the solution that will bring hope and will bring fulfillment, as opposed to, it's not working, I'm so out of here, bye. Wow. I think we've got to treat people with dignity and kindness, because sometimes people just get on the wrong track and need to be redirected. Sometimes they need a reset. And sometimes it is done. Sometimes it's time to go, okay, it's not working, it's done. And seeing the perspective of all that and trying to bring that, I think that's what I'm supposed to do.
Man, talk to me about the difference between a song. Like, what is it about a song that takes it from the difference between a song that's just not doing that great to a song that just travels across the world? And I know you've had those songs. Maybe even share a story of a song where you saw it in its infancy and then just kind of saw where it really made that global impact. Because I think all of our listeners will be pretty pumped.
I think probably one of the songs that's had the most impact that I was able to work alongside was Waymaker. And I think I didn't sign it. I'll put my hand up and say I did not sign it, but I was there when the song was signed. And we were actually working towards Leland's album, Better Word.
Yeah, and great album.
I remember that song was in our early gathering of what should we record. And I remember one Friday morning, I opened up iTunes Apple Music, whatever it was at the time. And I just saw that Michael W. Smith had dropped a copy of it. And I was like, oh, no, we haven't recorded it yet. And I remember I listened, it was like, oh, actually, it's okay because he doesn't come in until like halfway through the song. And I was like, there still isn't a male version. And then Leland called me and he went, oh, did you see Michael's just released Waymaker? And I went, yeah. And he goes, oh, I so wanted to do that song. And I went, well, we can still do it. And he was like, but Michael's dropped it. So, and I went, but have you listened to it? And he goes, well, no. And I went, Michael doesn't come in until halfway through. There is no male-led version of that song. And so we stuck with it. I remember just before we recorded, just the significance of that night, because Leland had never recorded a live worship album before. And that's really what he delivered so well. And I remember just feeling the weight of significance. Their family was there, like the whole team, and it felt like a significant night. Little did we know, and I remember it was one of those moments that really made me weep. Was then, less than a year later, somebody sends me a social media video clip of like a week, 2 weeks into lockdown, and all these doctors at the top of the roof of a hospital singing Waymaker, the version that we had recorded with Leland as the background, and worshiping to it in the middle of a pandemic. And I remember texting Leland and Casey and just going, little did we know the significance that the recording of that song was going to have, because that, along with a couple of other songs, became the soundtrack of the church during that pandemic. Yeah. And the humility of going, I had no idea, God, that you were building this story when we were there. So, I mean, that's one. I think the other more recent one is probably Made for More with Josh Baldwin. I mean, that song. I mean, it came across as a demo from a writing camp that he nearly didn't go to. And just hearing it and going, wow, lyrically, this says something fresh. This is different. And then just seeing that song impact in a couple of worship times before we recorded the album. And then, just seeing how it's been embraced by the church, and, a radio number one, but a song that has consistently stayed one of the most sung churches in or church songs in our time at the moment, is just amazing to see it. And to see it even on things like, to see viral videos on reels and on TikTok of people just worshiping along to it and connecting with it. You're going, okay, these songs connect. And that's the joy, is like when you walk into a room and you hear people singing it and you go, everything we go through is worthwhile for this, because people are finding their voice in the songs that we agonize over and we fight for and we struggle with and we rip apart and build up again. And it's just beautiful to see it.
Wow. We had Josh on the podcast last season and got to kind of chat a little bit about that song. And it's just a beautiful song. It's being sung in churches, like you said, all across the world. Talk to me a little bit, like pull the curtain back a little bit on, as a publisher, you're working with Bethel Music, and, you're hearing a lot of songs. I can't imagine actually how many songs you hear in a given week. And then you're kind of like sifting through of like, okay, which are the songs that are going to end up on this record? What does that process look like for you? And what exactly are you listening? Is it that singability? Is it that fresh message? Is it something that just kind of like that X factor in a song, Adrian?
It's all of the above. I mean, I think the first thing you've got to do is you've got to understand what is the artist wanting to say? Like, what is the message that is on them at the time? And what weight does that carry for them? And does this song represent them well? So like, I've heard many songs that are really well written, but are generic in that there's no spot that it comes from. And there's nothing wrong with that. They are nearly hymn-like. They're good, but they're generic. And we need those songs. But when a song is birthed out of something and out of a need or out of a cry, then people are intrigued. And it can just be your song for a season, or it can be something that travels. So
Wow.
I want to find out from the artist, what is the message that God's given you? What is the call in your life? What is it that you feel God is saying to you today? And then why? Why is that there? Is there something that's happened? Is there something you're walking through? Is there something going on? Yeah. And then making sure that that the songs they're bringing to the table are in line, and then bringing as many as possible. You can never have too many songs. Like, we will go from, I think with Josh's project, we hit about 60 songs that we gathered down to 7 of his to go on that project. Wow. But there were some in there that are amazing songs that will find their way onto release, but they didn't fit on that release. They just weren't cut. So I'm working with another one of our artists at the moment towards an album, but they have a very particular message that they feel God has as part of their story that they really need to get out there, because it will relate to people. Yeah. But they have got some songs that are really good, but they're not fitting in that zone. But the others, there's a thread that goes through the other songs that really tie them together. And you're going, there's a core message here, but they're not all saying the same thing, if that makes sense. So it's not just saying, it's got to be.
So it's not redundancy on the record.
No, it's not. So for me, sometimes when I sit down with the artists and we're cutting out songs that are really good, sometimes my phrase to them is, this is a not yet song. This is a not ever. This is a not now. There are some songs that are not ever. No, I never might be putting that one out. But I think it's that thing where you've got to work through it. And normally artists get on board. There are times when we joke about arm wrestling for a song. And sometimes if they really are so passionate about it, and you kind of go, it's okay. Then we kind of go, all right, can we make it work? Yeah, we'll make it work on the album. And sometimes those are the songs that really lift off because they're so passionate about it. And I think the artist has to be passionate about the song. It has to have relevance to them. It has to have meaning. And when I see an artist really fighting for a song, I'll cave. And I'll go, all right, let's put it on. But then sometimes the question is, which one do we lose to put it on? And they're like, but I don't want to lose any. And go, we have to lose one because we don't have the budget to do another song. So what are we going to do? So you're working that through. But for me, I want to make sure that what we put out is true to the artist, that is really who they are, what they want to say, and that we're getting the best songs that we can to really put that forward. And sometimes it's a journey.
Would you say these days you're working more with artists or with churches putting out records?
To be honest, with Bethel, I think we have been focused on the collective, but that's more A&Ring by committee. There's a whole team of us together working that. But right now, I'm more focused on some of our artists that we have within the collective and their individual projects. So we're just wrapping up Zaria Zachary's first project.
Very cool.
We're about to release a single from Edward Rivera, who was signed to us recently. I'm starting to work on a Bethany Worley project. So there's stuff coming through that it's really the complete voice of the collective. And also we're looking at what we do with Josh next as well. Like he's just so prolific. We've got bags of songs and we're kind of going, okay, what do we do with all these? So we're working through that as well. But that's the best position to be in.
Yeah. Now I know there's a lot of, worship leaders and probably musicians and songwriters that are listening to this. And what would be kind of like that piece of advice that you would give them for, just writing a song that really connects with their church, but also like, you're talking about, man, if you have like a specific testimony or something that really hits a chord with your audience, like, for songwriters that are writing for their church and putting out, is it workshop the songs? Is it, what would be that key piece of advice to that young songwriter worship leader that we're talking to?
I think there's a sensitivity that has to come from knowing what is going on in your church at the time and what is the song that they need to sing in this season.
Yeah, that's good.
One of the phrases I use with writers is, whose white of eyes are you looking into when you write this song or when you sing this song? Who are you staring into their eyes and going, this is your song, because this is what you need to sing? So I think there's, it's finding that point of connection of going, this is my song in this season. This is what I need to sing. And again, it's that thing of going, a lot of songwriters and artists are kind of like, I need my song that's going to break me into CCLI. That's going to give me a radio hit. That's going to make me travel. No, that's not your focus. Your focus is what's happening in a Sunday morning in your congregation, and what do they need to sing? What are they walking through? Because honestly, if that connects, the fire is going to spread. So I go to Hope You See Church. I know you've had Dustin on here.
Oh, yeah.
He's my pastor.
That's awesome.
But I remember just before our church launched, we were doing worship nights on the build up to it. Yeah. And that was when he introduced I Speak Jesus. Wow. And we were a bunch of people who were craving a fresh community and a fresh release of the Holy Spirit. And we'd all been walking through stuff, and our families were all walking through stuff. That song became our anthem. And I can tell you, I've heard that song in multiple places, but it doesn't sound the same as it does in our church, because it really means something for our church. And it really carries something because there's history in that song in our church. I look at songs like Overcome by John Egan, which is back in the day, but that song was written out of a pain point for their church when their pastor had fallen, and then they had a shooting in the church. And it's kind of like, we need a song for us. And then that song travels. And I think that's the point where people get that point of connection going, I get it. I needed to say that. So I think don't necessarily write for the world or for the nation. Right where it's at, because the principle is Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the outer ends of the earth. That's where it is. So right now you're writing for Jerusalem. What's the song that your Jerusalem needs to sing? And you know what? If that really connects, then it's going to start going to Judea, Samaria, the outer ends of the earth.
Wow, that's so good, man. Dude, give a little bit of, I guess, hope to, we live in a jaded world. We live in a cynical world, and there's always a podcast coming out, right? There's always something coming out where it's like, kind of just tearing down the industry and the business side of what you do. And I mean, one of my, exciting things on this conversation is for people to just kind of see, like, man, like on the other end of this, there are people that really care about the kingdom, that care about the church and whatnot. Give a little bit of hope to somebody who's out there like, man, it's all just, it's all about industry and dollars and whatnot. Like, what have you seen in the church world and the music side of things where it's like, no, like, this is really what it's all about. What is it all about, Adrian, for somebody that does what you do?
For me, I want to see people built up. I want to see people encouraged. I want to see the church have a voice. I want to see God's creativity put to work. Now, does that mean that everybody's going to be successful as far as success is concerned in our measurement of finance and massive tours and all that kind of stuff? No, but but it's the same. You can look at pastors and go, is everybody going to be a mega church pastor? Or who's the guy that is actually looking after that 50 people church in the middle of the hills of wherever? Wow. And you kind of go, is he complaining, or does he know what his call is? And I think for anybody who's pursuing this, is kind of like, be faithful. Be faithful to where you're called, and be faithful with the audience that you're given. I think there is that sense of entitlement sometimes that can come because we walk into churches that's got great production. We've got massive LED screens behind us. We've got really cool lights. We've got a great PA system. We've got stereo in-ears. We have a team who are there making it all happen. And that's amazing. And people will sing back to us. Well, most people will sing back to us if they're not drinking coffee. But it's a really good place to be as a musician and as a singer. And I think when you take it outside of that, it's not always like it. How hard are we willing to work? So I guess the way I'm trying to say it is, so if you take it outside of that, where it's easy to come in and plug into a system that's already there that is amazing, And then you go, let's go to a little church plant where we're carrying in a little vocal PA system on a Sunday morning at 7, and we're running the wires, and there's going to be feedback, and it's not great. Is that what God's called you to? What's God called you to? To lead worship for the people? Okay, but does that mean it needs all the production? That's lovely to have, but that's not our entitlement. We feel we're entitled to that. What we're entitled to do is to lead people into the throne room. That's our entitlement. The rest of it will come as God sees that we're able to walk into it. So I think the disillusionment sometimes is we set the expectation wrong because it's our interpretation of what we've been called to. So it's like some people say, God's called me to be a songwriter. Great. Are you writing songs every day? Well, I'm waiting on a publishing deal. Nope, you can't wait in a publishing deal because he's asked you to write songs. If you're not faithful with where you are, what do you need to write songs? I need a melody and I need words. I need pen and paper. I don't need a full Logic system. I don't need Pro Tools. I don't need the right plugins. I don't need all of that. All I need is the melody and the words, and I need to be consistent with that because that's being a songwriter. So if God's called you to be a songwriter, that's it. You don't need the publishing deal, and you can go, yeah, but I'm holding down a 9-to-5 job. Great. Well, what are you doing after 5 o'clock?
Wow.
Be faithful to your family, but at the same time, are you writing once a week? Are you writing twice a week? You're writing 3 times a week? If you're a worship leader, it's the same thing. What are you doing? Well, it's kind of like I'm waiting until they ask me onto the platform. So where are you leading worship? Are you leading it in your small group?
Wow.
Well, no, but I saw God called me to lead the church. Well, that is the church. So are you leading your small group of 12 people? Are you leading in your youth group? Are you leading at the old people's home? You know, are you leading worship? Are you showing God, hey, you asked me to do this. I know I'd really love, but right now you asked me to do this, so I'm going to be faithful in this and then see what happens. And honestly, I think it's ripping away our entitlement and going back to what exactly did God say to you? Because when we say he's called me to lead worship, we're thinking, man, I'm going to be the next Phil Wickham. I'm going to be the next Brandon Lake. I'm going to be the next Tomlin. That's who I am. And you kind of go, is that what God said? Or did he say, I want you to lead worship?
Man.
And that, I think, is where sometimes we go wrong and become more disillusioned because we interpret what God actually said into something greater than what it is. Now, should we not have vision to be that? I have no problem with that. But if that is where your disillusionment comes, then refocus. Go back and refocus and go, okay, let's humble ourselves before God because at the right time, he will exalt us. I think that's what it says in scripture. So that's really where we are. So I think cynicism is so easy to come by, but be faithful and go back to what God exactly said. That's why it's important when somebody gives you a word at church, write it down somewhere, make a note of it somewhere or record it, and then go back and go, what did God actually say? Because I thought it was this. And then you go, oh, actually, no, it was actually that. That's exactly what he said. So, and dial that back and go, am I doing the core of what he said, or am I expecting the gloss that should come with it?
I love that, man. I do think there's a lot of entitlement that many of us wrestle with. And I think it's like, man, put your calling on that forefront. And I think you just hit it on the head, and be faithful where you're at. Be faithful where you're at. That's what God's calling us to. He's not calling you to the lights and the success and the mirrors and whatever that looks like. He's calling you to faithfulness. And that's what we want to hear at the end of the done. Well done, good and faithful servant. Man, Adrian, this has been amazing. I got just a few more moments with you, man. I got to ask you a question that I ask everybody on the podcast, man. What is the Holy Spirit speaking to you right now? What's kind of just been on repeat in your prayer life as you've been seeking the Lord?
I had a really weird one. So, every year now I've been reading through the Bible, and there's certain parts where I've hit speed bump, and the speed bump is normally around that Leviticus number kind of thing. And honestly, when I hit Leviticus this year, I was kind of going, God, what was the point in this one? All that stuff about, you bring the lamb and the turtle doves and then it's repeated down because then they brought the lamb and the turtle doves and they, splattered the blood and so much. And I was kind of going, I don't see the point because everything's repeated. God says it, and then they deliver it in exactly the same way. And then I suddenly went, man, I've missed the point all along. Because for me, now I'm not a theologian, but this is just for me. The whole point comes down to going, but then when the veil was torn and he said we were no longer under the law, all those details of if you've got a skin blemish and there's a white hair on it, you're sent out of the camp for 7 days. I don't need to go out of the camp anymore. If I haven't brought the turtle dove in the way that it's presented, that doesn't matter, because he said, what's the greatest commandment? Love one another. Love others as I've loved you. You know, it's kind of like suddenly when the veil was torn, all the detail that we had to go through to make ourselves righteous, to make ourselves acceptable, to make ourselves clean and purified was gone. And now the yoke is easy, the burden is light, because he's suddenly gone, hey, we're no longer having to carry around all this legalization.
Wow.
All we have is a freedom and a direct communication with God. We didn't need to send Moses up to the mountain anymore. We speak directly, and he speaks to us when we sit in his presence. So for me, it's kind of like suddenly I realized that's why the yoke is easy. That's why the freedom is there, the complete access. Well, that's why the veil was torn, because now I have got a new freedom. Anyway, I know it's not directly to do with worship, but honestly, it made my heart leap a little bit more. And going, Lord, that makes so much sense to me now, and I can see where my freedom comes from. Anyway, many theologians will write into you now and go, that completely off his rocker, and that's okay.
Hey, listen, a lot of worship leaders are probably grateful that we don't have to lead a song while somebody's bringing down animals for sacrifice. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing right there. Exactly.
That saves a lot of embarrassment.
I'm also in the book of Leviticus right now, and so I think you're giving me some fresh perspective when I go to my Bible reading plan tomorrow.
Awesome.
I'm going to be grateful in a whole new way. Adrian, you're a joy, man. I appreciate your spirit. Thanks for spending time with us, bro.
Thank you, Curtis. Been my pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Curtis Parks. To connect or learn more, visit curtisparks.com. This episode was brought to you by your friends at PraiseCharts.com. Whether you need simple chord charts, lead sheets, vocal arrangements, full orchestrations, or stems, we've got it all ready to download instantly. Plus, their affordable bundles and flexible formats save you time and money, so you can focus on leading worship and not scrambling for resources. If you haven't checked them out yet, now is the time. Visit PraiseCharts.com and get everything you need for your worship team today.